Okay, sorry for that. We're
Sorry.
changing storage spots for the recording.
That Ricky and I, of course, have been in touch for a long time. But when I read that article and that interview, I thought, here's a voice that I'd like to hear. But James, you're next. And I welcome you. And I'm, as I said, delighted to meet you via Zoom.
Thank you. Grateful to be here. I'm James Ehrlich. I'm founder of Regen Villages, which is a Stanford University spin-off company that is realizing a technological approach to the future of living in software-enabled, bioregenerative, and resilient, self-reliant neighborhoods. So it's a combination of integrating clean water, high-yield organic food production, renewable energy, waste to resource management, and passive home typologies in marriage with this relationship of open space and founded on really Gaian principles and standing on the shoulders of some great minds for me on this topic in terms of organic food, permaculture, and you might want to call it a high-tech kibbutz for our friend Galia in Tel Aviv. Inspired by that, of course, the original kibbutzim and how you basically people had to live within their own footprint. I continue my affiliation at Stanford. I'm actually moved through the School of Mechanical Engineering. I'm now in the School of Medicine and what's called the Stanford Flourishing Project. I'm appointed faculty to Singularity University. I'm a senior fellow since 2008 at NASA Ames Research Center, albeit they're pretty much off-planet focused, but I'm a terrestrial researcher in that way. And under Obama, now continue under Biden-Harris, appointed to a White House OSTP Joint Task Force on Regenerative Infrastructure. So I've pretty much devoted my life to this idea of technology as a means to an end for human flourishing. And there's masculine, there's feminine, and of course, I think amongst many people in the world right now are pretty much ready for a global feminine leadership movement because us men are not doing a good job, and I'm pretty concerned about where things are going these days. So yeah, I guess I represent more the technological side, and also I refer to it more like Amish tech. So I joke a bit and say that, when the power goes out in Pennsylvania for the Amish, it's Tuesday. They just don't. It doesn't matter to them. So that's my feeling about compassion and altruism, and the work that I've done through Stanford has included effective neuroscience and has included the broader aspects of what it means to flourish. So I'm hopeful. I think that's what it's about, being optimistic.
Well, welcome and thank you, James. And Dalia? And I gather that you two know each other, James and Galia.
We don't. I don't. Do we, James?
Not that I know of. Nice to meet you.
Not that I know of either. It's nice to meet you as well. And hi, everyone. And hi, Rian. So good to see you as ever. Funny enough, I grew up in Palo Alto, actually. So I'm reverse commuting from Stanford. Spent a lot of time on Stanford campus, a lot of time in the area in general. So I arrive at this moment from the world of cryptocurrency. So kind of some of the frontier tech, actually. What can I say that will be helpful? So I'm a founder of something called the Bancor protocol. Bancor was one of the first DeFi protocols. DeFi is decentralized finance. We essentially invented what's now called an AMM, an automated market maker, or a bonding curve, basically an automated way for any cryptocurrency to be converted into any other cryptocurrency in an automated, kind of algorithmically driven way, and most importantly, in a permissionless way, meaning that any currency can join this network of interoperable currency exchange. And the reason that's important and the reason that we came into this space to begin with was to enable what we call a long tail of currencies to thrive. We specifically came from community currencies. So think of a Stanford coin or a Palo Alto coin or a women's coin or a green coin. You know, you can really think of a lot of different types of currencies. And our work continues to be based on my other mentor. Rian is certainly my one and only. And in addition, the work of Bernard Lietaer, if anyone is familiar with him, he also was a dear friend and mentor of mine. He passed away a couple years ago. He's considered the godfather of community currencies, if you will. And he wrote extensively, much like Rian, some incredible books. I can list them in a bit in the chat if anyone's interested. The Future of Money, Rethinking Money. He really came also from a Gaian based perspective, which was that whenever we have a monoculture of anything, really, you could look at it in agriculture, right, where we have big wheat and big corn and kind of the opposite of permaculture. When you have that in any system, you have imbalance, and certainly the monetary system is no different. And so he's done just some fascinating work, both historically looking at the differences in time when we had multi-currency worlds versus uni-currency worlds. Of course, uni-currencies kind of, represent a lot of concentrated power, whether it's kings stamping gold coins, etc. And now it's, of course, presidents or countries or whoever's stamping things. It's hard to know, stamping bills and things like that. And so we came into this world of community currencies very naive, just thinking, it's so simple. We'll just make an app and everyone can make their own currency. And we ended up backing into a very complex world of international finance, not to mention financial regulation, not to mention where cryptocurrency takes things. And that's kind of how we got here. Me personally, I always looked at the tech that I worked on or worked with through an ethical lens and kind of the why, which I think is very shared to this group and certainly to Rian's work. What is money? Why do we have money? What is value? How do we know that money and value are correlated? In fact, often they're not. And so a couple years ago, I had the good fortune to host an event called Bretton Woods 75. Bretton Woods, for those who aren't familiar, was a monetary agreement made in 1944. Maybe you passed over it in your history class, whenever that was. It was the global monetary agreement post World War II. And we actually took the name of our protocol, Bancor, from that event. Bancor you can think of as the path not taken. So the world in 1944, with the leadership of America, decided on, or kind of was encouraged into using the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Another kind of reason for a lot of the imbalance that we see today, which is when you use the currency of one nation as also the global reserve currency for all the nations, that nation sort of in a pretty obvious way will get superpowers. Goes into inflation resistance. You can print however much money you want because the whole world needs your money, so it doesn't matter. You end up externalizing a lot of your bills, basically your costs, to other nations. Anyhow, we're now seeing kind of the arc of time, the 75 years since that agreement, though it's not a new arc in history. We have many of these arcs. And so a couple years ago, I was fortunate enough to host an event called Bretton Woods 75, which was kind of a rethinking, basically was a Trojan horse event to bring Rian onto the stage. I had come across her work and really had, I'm sure many of us have had this experience with Rian's books, just a full aha moment, lots of relief and gratitude of like, oh, somebody figured this out. Great. I've kind of lived my whole life with this cluster and this tension that things are very, very awry. And thank goddess, someone has the answers, and it's Rian Eisler. And so I had, again, the good fortune to bring Rian out to the event. She gave the keynote. I'm happy to throw the link into the chat as well if folks want to see the beautiful keynote that she gave at that event. And she was, bookended by Larry Summers and a lot of very traditional kind of fancy economic thinkers. And by far, Rian stole the show, had the room really from moment one. And we became close. I consider Rian a great friend in my life and a great light in my life. And I have no particular, I'm not working particularly with AI or some of the other frontier tech that Rian and the Ford Foundation are looking at with this toolkit, but I do remain very, very committed to finding ways to bring Rian's work to the forefront, because I feel that the blueprint is just fully there. It's all in the books. She tells us exactly what we need to do, exactly how to do it. It's quite digestible. Thank you so much, Quincy, and for the link in the chat. And so that's a passion of mine. And if working on this toolkit or offering any insights here is a way to help, then I'm happy to do it. And I'm also happy to be continuously thinking of how to bring Rian's work, to more forums, more formats, more places, other initiatives that I work on, etc. I hope that's a.
Thank you so much, Galia, dear. It is wonderful having you, seeing you again. And really, you and James and John are very much the technology part. John, can we see you again, or have you disappeared? There you are.
I'm here.
Yes.
And thank you.
I think you two met in Bretton Woods, Galia, because John came. And it was wonderful indeed.
That's right.
To have you there. And this, well, I'm going to let John introduce himself, but I want to say what a wonderful friend Galia has been, and John also has been. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you again, and thanks for dealing with my camera. I'm going to talk about sustainability in a little while, and I live in New Jersey. And in the past 3 or 4 days, we've had a massive windstorm. It just snowed where it normally wouldn't be snowing. So I'm keenly aware of aspects of the planet, which I never was before. But first I want to say, Galia, if that was your event, I had a blast at that event. And Rian's keynote was by far, in my opinion, just the mic drop of the event, certainly, and for many events I've been to. Rian, I tell people all the time about that, and I so appreciate your invite. As memory serves, I think, Rian, you were like, John, would you want to come and sort of say a few words to introduce me? And I was beyond honored, because I'm like, I'll get you a latte. I'll do anything if I can be around Rian Eisler. Are you kidding me? And at that event, which again, and forgive me, Gali, if you ran it, I thought it was an excellent event. I had a blast there. But like a lot of the events I'm at too, there's oftentimes like billionaires and policymakers and whatever else, and people who are wonderful. And I learn a ton. But there's kind of like a vibe around them. And then Rian just got up, and Rian, you're just Rian. There's such a powerful force of just human beauty and kindness and grace. But within a few words, it was just pin drop, and with whatever you said about like the real issue is about domination. And it was just, for me, it was just electric. It just was like everyone, it was like crickets stopped chirping. It was just like, what is she going to say? And it was, I'm not teasing, it was just wonderful to be there. So anyway, and by the way, Gali, a quick note, if you haven't read Kim Stanley Robinson's latest book, he's one of the world's leading climate fiction writers. And it's called The Future Society. The title will come to me, but he does a magnificent job of having each chapter represent different voices. And there's sections on the Future Society, I think is what it's called. There's sections on economists And I've never thought that I would care about quantitative easing. I never knew I would even know what that meant. But he talks about in one of his chapters the power that the US dollar has with all the other, the Fed Reserve, et cetera, how 5 or 6 major global institutions, the decisions that they make literally determine at least the specie form of capital around the world. Okay, sorry, that was a bit off topic, but Rian Eisler, I think we share this, has produced in her writing and thinking probably the most formative aspects of how I think about my work. And I'm deeply honored that Rian calls me her friend and that I can count her as a mentor. I talk about you all the time, Rian.
Oh, bless.
And
Yeah.
well, I just do, I mean, it's sort of like, if someone's like, are you a coffee drinker? I'm like, yes. And what do you think about the world? Let me tell you about Rian. I mean, for years, I've worked for about 10 years. So my background, I was an actor, professional actor in New York for about 15 years. Then I got into writing as a way to kind of pay bills when my kids were old enough that traveling was hard. And I fell into the business world. I worked doing biz dev for a couple of organizations. And then I got into PR when Twitter was born and became an EVP of a top 10 PR firm and really learned about the business world from the inside and pretty immediately got very, disheartened, disenchanted is a pretty lackadaisical term. Let's call it anger even towards GDP mindsets. And by GDP, I mean exponential growth, not the people, not the work. I got to work with P&G and HP and all these wonderful companies. But I just saw that this desire to bring good products to people was dictated by exponential growth mindsets. I'll use the term enslaved to shareholder ideologies that are really part of the whole domination thing. If you want to call it neoliberalism or patriarchy, Rian has done so beautifully the simplistic, or I should say simple, meaning very powerful and impactful communication, domination. Like all those other words are incredibly important, colonization, et cetera. I'm not trying to mitigate them, but where those can maybe sometimes distract because it immediately gets political, or for me, I just get angry. Domination versus what's the opportunity and the need, partnership. It's just so beautiful in those two words. And so much is encapsulated so beautifully. It distills it to such a pure, active need, Anyway, so after what happened is in my life, my father, who was a psychiatrist, passed away. In the same year I was let go from this big PR firm. I wasn't fired, but I was let go. Here's why. The shareholders who owned the PR firm wanted to increase their quarterly profits. I still don't know if there were any other reasons. And I just brought in, literally, I just brought in a $500,000 account with a big pharmaceutical firm. And back in the day, Twitter and pharmaceutical, not something that people were really thinking about. So it just, I was sort of made, and the person who let me go was in the C-suite. We were all very sad. It just made me realize this is not a system that makes sense for the customer. This is not a system that makes sense for the patient because of that client I mentioned. And so the anger that, you might feel when you get let go also turned into an awareness that GDP is this really kind of high level message saying to people, you only have worth if you have wealth. You only have worth once you do X, especially in America, especially being a guy. And this is, by the way, Jed, I'd love to talk to you more about this. I think men are maybe the main people who, by getting out of the way, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get out of the way effectively, might have some of the most power to share, power to give up, power. I don't know. I have to talk to you about this. Anyway, my dad passed away. He was a psychiatrist. I got into positive psychology. And I've written 3 books. The last 2 focus quite a bit on positive psychology. The most recent one was called Artificial Intelligence. And I'm not really sure why, but I started writing some articles for The Guardian and Mashable about the need for a code of ethics for AI. Not sure why, I'm not an ethicist, it just became a passion. And I got lucky because a big organization called IEEE, it's the world's largest engineering association, founded by Thomas Edison. It's in 500,000 members in more than 160 countries. They invited me to speak at South by Southwest, this great conference I'd gone to for years. And I realized they were kind of like the United Nations of technology. Like, that's not an exaggeration, they're massive. And I went and pitched someone who was already working on this at the organization. I said, we need a code of ethics for AI, because I kept interviewing people, technologists at the C-level, you know, whoever. And I'm like, what's your code of ethics for this technology? And people said, well, we're using Asimov's laws of robotics. And I'm laughing because it's, you know, do no harm, whatever. Anyway, fast forward, except to say that now, about 5 or 6 years later, I helped drive, I wasn't the sole driver by any means, a group of about 700 people to create a big document called Ethically Aligned Design, which had 3 iterations. It's about 300 pages. It's essentially a book, but it's been used by the OECD, UNESCO, the United Nations, dozens of companies. It's been cited in hundreds of documents. There's no real way to have one code of ethics for AI. You can't just have a list. But that said, the principles at the front end of our document, I'm very proud of. I didn't write them, it's the volunteers. But human rights, for instance, is the first principle. And that means that when you design technology, you have to use something like the Ruggieri principles or the Ruggie principles in business to make sure your technology honors human rights. The second, however, principle is focused on human well-being and flourishing and planetary flourishing, where you have to use economic indicators like the UN SDGs or Bhutan's gross national happiness, or Rianne's work that she's done at indicators, to actually say, when we're building this technology, we are not only going to prioritize exponential growth. Because I think in a similar way that, like, especially like white privilege, being a guy, at least in the States, you kind of don't know what you don't know till someone tells you what you don't know, and then it becomes very visible. Companies, you know, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but unless it's stated explicitly otherwise, and key performance indicators, to use business speak, are not referenced, where those indicators are things beyond fiscal means, then every meeting I've been to, every meeting, policy otherwise, at the OECD in Paris, whatever else, every single decision is being discussed in the framework of GDP exponential growth, unless the opening salvo or conversation is, here, we're going to talk about prioritizing other metrics. Otherwise, it's just, you know, rearranging deck chairs in the Titanic, and the Titanic is GDP. So last thing I'll say here, because of the, I guess, success of that program I helped lead, I've been asked to be the sustainability practice lead at a division of IEEE, which I'm honored about, but I'm also frankly overwhelmed, still dealing with, I'm not trying to be funny here, existential terror at the idea of where our planet is. But guess what? I'll close with some good news, Rianne Eisler. The only way we save the planet, I've been doing massive research only for 5 months, and it's such a broad space that's kind of like almost silly to say, but over and over and over, you can read the science from the United Nations, IPCC, et cetera. 1.5 degrees, we're already over it pretty much, but we have to achieve at least 50% of those goals by 2030, 7 years from now, or the world, meaning people, after 2050, et cetera, really won't be around, right? The planet's going to be fine. She's suffering, but she'll be here. It's the people. I want my kids to be here. I want your kids to be here. But Rianne, again, has the magic sauce, as it were, partnership, coming together, changing the narratives, especially the socio-technical narratives around the planet, around climate justice, is beyond critical. The people I work with, God bless them, have so many technological solutions, you know, sensors, and using Bitcoin or blockchain to, you know, have decentralized structures for having solar panels in Ethiopia. It's staggering how wonderful it is. But I oftentimes will say the statistic, for instance, that in the US, 80% of climate devastation already, and in the past number of years, mostly affects Black, Brown, and Latino populations. So the fact that I'm a white male, if I don't know that and try my best to step out of the way, and by the way, not tell people I step out of the way, you know, I don't start meetings like, hey, everyone, I'm getting out of the way. The point is that, but that said, it's still challenging in the sense of, I want to use any power I have, naturally with the privilege that I'm still not really sure how much it affects everyone, but I know it does, to do that, to get out of the way and then just start meetings where I'm not even there. And certainly one thing I know I can do, and I'll close with this, is always point to Rianne. So I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much.
My goodness, John. Thank you. Wow. I am humbled and grateful, as I am for Galia's also. So I'm going to turn it back to Sarah, who will take us to the next part which is critical, which is your thoughts about what we have. And it's a draft, as you know, and we really, really, really need your input.
So we found in our group on Monday that it was a useful thing to begin by just looking together at the toolkit. Has everyone here had a chance to spend some time with it, or would it be helpful to kind of walk through it first before we begin talking, or both?
Probably both. I had a chance to give a cursory look, but
Okay. All right. Well, let's just sort of remind ourselves then of what this resource is looking like. Let's find the right scale here that's readable, but also not. So this toolkit really is intended for use by people who both are doing sort of the visioning work around technological development, and also the building work, the development work. So that's sort of broadly the audience, and we can talk more about specific sub-audiences that might need particular framings or other kind of language or
Sarah, let's make it a little bit bigger, because this part is just totally illegible. Not smaller, but bigger. That's better.
for clicking the wrong button there. So the contents, what we wanted to do was to begin with a sort of broad introduction for people who have no familiarity with Rion's work, a background and overview of that kind of core concept of this domination partnership continuum, and then immediately apply it to the world of technology. So here's the concept, here's why it matters in terms of technologies. And why the kinds of arguments that we tend to fall into are not going to be helpful ones in terms of creating the new foundations for a partnership world. And so that's all in that first section. And really the kind of heart of the tool part of the document is this second piece, which is these 8 questions that we're proposing that technology builders and framers ask themselves, and each one of them has then subscales underneath it, which we'll take a quick look at. Then we thought it would be helpful to go a little bit more into just a little bit more depth, and you might have suggestions for what the right level of depth is here, into each of those 8 questions. Why is this the question? Why is this the question that matters? And what's a little bit of the research that demonstrates, the importance of this piece of the puzzle? And then there's a page of resources that give people pathways to learn more specifically about Rion's work. And of course, as this grows, there will be opportunities to point people in all kinds of other resource directions as we get a sense of what the right points of connection are going to be.
And I'm just going to interrupt for a moment.
Please.
Because Galia mentioned that the fact that neither you, Sarah, nor Quincy really introduced yourselves. So maybe we should pause for a moment before we start getting into the 8 questions, and have you just briefly say something. So Quincy.
Thank you, Galia. My name's Quincy, and I am the communications lead at Center for Partnership Systems. And so I work with Rion and Sarah all the time, and it's such an honor to work with them. And one thing that I've been spearheading is basically turning all of Rion's research and her life's work into infographics and some media kits that are easily shareable and very easily digestible, so that we can reach a different and a broader audience, other than people that just read her white papers, and have maybe less of a long attention span. So yes, that's what I.
Thank you
Do
so
you
much.
work with the animation at all, or mostly static?
Mostly static, but so many of Rion's stories would be beautifully told through animation. I always
Maybe
think.
it's something we can connect on. Regardless, I'd love to chat with you about it.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. No, and Quincy is, as you'll see when you look at the graphics, she's doing a fabulous job. And yes, I'd love to see them animated. And Sarah, do you want to just very quickly?
Sure.
Also-
Hi, everyone. I apologize. We didn't fold that in to our introductions. I'm Sarah Salty. I've been working with Rion for the last 12 years, primarily around education programs and the education mission of the center. So designing and facilitating first for many years live courses, and now we're moving more into the self-study online courses. And so looking at ways to engage people not only in learning about Rion's work, but taking ownership of it and applying it through their own leadership in their own different domains is sort of the focal point has been of my work. So it's lovely to be with you all. And
Sarah has done and continues to do a wonderful job. But please now continue. And I'm sorry for the interruption, but that was the missing piece.
no worries. We're all comfortable being non-linear here. It's how this, iterative processes are how this all goes. So we introduced the core idea that the question is whether technology is guided by an ethos of domination or partnership, and then explain the kind of core configuration of domination and partnership, those kind of key elements of each one that give us a sense of where we are on the continuum, and go on to make the argument for the four cornerstones that Rion spoke to in her introduction today, and really focusing in on these four areas that give us this whole system picture of the intervention points that we want to focus today's technology architects, builders, programmers, et cetera, on. So the scales then are oriented around around 8 questions. So the first is, who is framing and building the technology? And Rion, makes the point here that it is not only about this question relates not only to the sort of identity issues around inclusion of diverse people, but also the values issues of inclusion of people who have an ethical framework that's oriented to partnership systems. The second question is about the assumptions and narratives about human nature that are embedded in the technology, and there's a set of subscales there to look at. The third question is what kind of social and economic relationships does the technology support? Fourth, we look at what kinds of communities and workplaces the technology supports. And again, this is taking us into the arena of the flows of communication and power, and the promotion of in-group versus out-group identities versus linking people in recognition of commonality and interconnection. Fifth question is, what gendered, family, and socioeconomic values are supported by the technology? Sixth is, what will this technology improve the lives of families and children and promote healthy human development? Seventh is what kind of relationship with our natural environment is supported by this technology. And finally, does the technology use the language and thinking of domination or partnership? So that's that narrative and language cornerstone. After that whole series of scales, and which, you know, are sort of clickable so that if you're looking at this in a digital way, a group that's working could say, well, we're here, you know, we're sort of here now, and then begin the conversation about what might it take to move another notch toward partnership systems. We offer then a short, you know, couple paragraph discussion of why each of these questions we believe are the right questions to be asking. And then as we saw in the contents, there's a page of resources, which includes that keynote from Bretton Woods, among a number of other resources that are good next steps for people who are encountering this again for the first time. So let me say that, you know, we will be we'll be sharing with you after the session today a sort of survey format tool that will let you kind of dig into the detail level of those scales, and offer any suggestions that you have at that level of detail. But for this time that we have together, we'd love to just hear from each of you your kind of first reactions to the toolkit as a resource, what comes up for you as key things that you'd like us to be thinking about with this resource, or how you see this moving into use. So Jed, go ahead. I see a hand.
Yeah, I know enough about the technology of Zoom now to know where the raise your hand thing is. I'm not sure where the things I'm going to share thoughts might fit, but from my work with gender, you know, my field, gender specific medicine and men's health, I think one of the things that needs to be recognized is the blind spots that the people that work in technology have. First, most of them are male. Most of them are, at least in our country, white males. And even those that are not male and white male, there's a certain mindset and a certain blindness to even know, you know, somebody said, knowing what you don't know. Maybe as James was talking about the things about white privilege that we don't even know we don't know. So I think there needs to be some recognition of that even as you're going through these things, there's some things that you need to at least be brought to your awareness that are likely blind spots, that you're not even going to be aware of the biases that you have, or the things that you think you're not biased, but because you're embedded in a system that already by its structure is not only male oriented, but a certain kind of maleness. And I've talked to Mo Gadet and some of my colleagues in the tech world of, you know, they're techies. They're a particular kind of male and a particular way of looking at the world, often that is extremely unable or blind to empathy, to connect in a lot of the partnership values, the feminine values that many of the people in it don't see and don't recognize that they don't see. So that's my contribution, some way in which those blind spots could be acknowledged and recognized in a beginning. And I don't know the process of how you would do that, but just talking about it and being able to talk on those levels, I think would help not only heighten the blind spots, but then help people address them. And as they then go through the information, which I think is good, to be able to get a more accurate sense of where they are and where they want to move. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Jed. And I think that that also came up to some extent, although not quite as directly, in the first session that we had. And I made a note that I think at the very beginning of this toolkit, we have to emphasize two things. One, that we have blind spots that we've inherited. And number two, that the focus of this toolkit is on what these blind spots obscure. And I think that if we put that at the very front, it'll be like, okay, you know, I mean, but thank you. But I think those two things, Sarah, don't you, and Quincy, and all of you, I mean, I think, and the other thing that came out, just to, is that in the ending part, we need to emphasize not only that this is a discussion, but that this is a discussion of how to move, of some of the ways to move the needle of the scale and why that's so important. So I hope that that sort of, but thank you, because you've again emphasized what I think we're gleaning, and it's very important. You've got to get people at the very beginning to realize that no, we're not talking about the things that you usually hear about. I mean, yeah, we're talking about the environment, but in the context of a whole systems change approach.
Thank
Anyway.
you so much, Jed. Is our other high level?
Yeah, I mean, I just struggle every day with this recurring topic about financial feasibility and current economic milieu, and looking at you know, through our lens, which is really a combination of both residential real estate and rezoning of land, especially agricultural land, to mixed use, and the sensitivities, the market sensitivities around housing and investor rate of return, and these kinds of dominant systems are challenging to disrupt. So personally, we've taken more of a Bucky Fuller approach, which is to try to make a new system that makes the old one obsolete, and but to work within the existing system to try to show the example that you can get an impact rate of return while also providing a social affordable accessibility to housing, and also creating the circumstances where people have what they need to survive and thrive at their doorstep. So this also harkens back to pretty much all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which we've published 2 different UN platform briefs, myself and 2 other professors from Stanford, specifically on this topic, that as you address peri-urban and rural housing and critical life support systems, that you reduce burdens on government, you reduce burdens on healthcare systems, you reduce burdens on brokering these beautiful, peaceful, happy places. So it's trying to create this mind shift, and I think that's one of the pieces that I'm struggling a bit with on looking at this sort of scale of things, and how we can, like I said, be a trim tab to get to these kinds of solutions.
Mhm.
Well, I think, and Mila just joined us, and welcome, Mila. But to your point, James, this is a tricky thing that I also think we need to address, which is that we are talking here about shifting the reward system. As we shift from domination to partnership. And at the same time, that even within the very flawed existing system, there are advantages. I thought I had turned this off, but I haven't apparently. I've got a new telephone and it's driving me crazy. Well, I'm so sorry. I guess that is it. I don't know what I just did, but I did something. Hopefully. I apologize. But I think you've touched on an area that we need to at least address. These 2 points. One, that we're talking about, as we move towards partnership, we will shift what is considered valuable, including economically valuable. And thus the reward system. And 2, that even within the existing parameters of a flawed system, there are advantages that are brought by using this approach, that we're in a period of transition. I think that this is what we're all struggling with, is how do we transition without a cataclysm?
Or within the cataclysm that is already unfolding. Yeah, thank you so much, James. I know both Galia and Ricky had hands flying too. So Galia, let's go to you next, and then we'll go to Ricky.
And let me just say one thing, James. It would be very, very helpful if you could put down where you think that could go and what it should say, because you've put your finger on something that is missing. Thank you. Yes, and I'm so sorry, Dahlia and James and John.
Or
No,
Ricky
no problem.
next, and then we'll go to John. Yeah.
So I'll just share a few thoughts that I had as we were going through it. And I'm not sure what order they go in or where they're most helpful. So one is that I think one of the challenges with the fact that we are probably highly on the domination side of the spectrum on most of the questions, right? If you were to use this toolkit, you're sitting in Facebook, you're sitting in Twitter, you're sitting in wherever, and you're using this toolkit. If you're being honest, we're probably very far to the domination side on most things. The problem with that, beyond the obvious ones that you talk about, is that it's very self-perpetuating, right? The more that you're the more that you're on the domination side, the more that you stay on the domination side, because that's kind of the loop in domination. And this came up for me very strongly actually today. And it's funny, I said I don't work with AI, but actually we have a whole AI program around art. Maybe you all have heard about NFTs and kind of been exposed to what's happening in cryptocurrency as it intersects with the art world and this particular modality called a non-fungible token. Anyhow, we're using AI to generate art, and many folks are doing this as well. And so there's this computer artist, this code that makes art. It's fascinating and amazing. I'll drop it in the text as well. You put in a text, words, and it generates a painting out of your words. And so I'm doing, and it's fun to play with, and you can put anything in, make a photorealistic painting of Half Moon Bay, make a stained glass painting of pigs flying south for the winter. I mean, you can really do anything, and it's cool what it comes up with. And as I'm doing it now for weeks, and I'm noticing that all the paint, they're very, very cool, but they're kind of also a little harsh, a little intense, a little dark. I put in "love is in the air," and I get these kind of like killer mosquitoes, like these killer tech mosquitoes that are spray painting hearts, like kind of like toxic hearts into the thing. And I'm thinking, is this this AI? Is this a guy? Is this a girl? Who's what's the painter? And so the answers I get are, it's not a gender, it's a computer, it's software. But then I'll hear it mentioned as a he, he did this or he did that. And so I actually went into this and realized that I was the first one on our team. I'm often the only woman. And I realized that of the 15 kind of hands that had been part of making this AI and all of the productization around it, I'm the first woman. And when I'm, just maybe par for the course, and we're on that left side of the spectrum. And when I asked this question to the rest of the team, like, do you guys feel these paintings are they're a little masculine? They're, I'm going to have a hard time getting women to sign on to the project, because the art that comes out, even though it's cool theoretically that a computer made this painting, it's not the painting I would put over my bed or in my house personally. And they say, what you'd expect them to say, which is, I never even thought of that. I never even thought of that. And I think and these are all good men, great men, to varying degrees, the way any group of people is varying degrees. And the reason that I bring it up is I think it's another kind of element that we can look at, which is when you have the self-perpetuating nature of that, right? So the way the implication sort of waterfalls from there is, okay, the paintings are kind of masculine, so we can't really get women to sign on to the project, which means the customers or the users are all going to be men, which means we're going to continue to cater sort of to that type of user demographic, which means it'll be harder to get women to join the team, which means I'll always be the only woman on the team. And so you get that kind of waterfall effect. And I think it's worth, I think there is, at least in Silicon Valley, other places, there is sort of heightened awareness of we want balance in our teams, we want balance in our companies. But part of what makes that really challenging is that we don't kind of have balance embedded into the products or the product thinking themselves. So it's like pushing a rock up a hill. So that was one thing that came up strongly for me. And another thing that maybe isn't addressed particularly in the toolkit, but comes up a lot, is this issue of language. He, she, the way that we talk about things, it maybe comes up a bit stronger in Hebrew because the way the pronouns work, there's like a different one for male and female. And so it, opens up an entire new box, Pandora's box, if you will, of issues, right? Of which things are inherently male in their pronouns and female. But it does come up in English, and I'm sure in other languages as well. So we'll talk about the AI as an it, but then there'll be that one sentence where it's a he. It's never a she if there's got to be one to pick. And so I think that the issue of language, and it doesn't have to be just about the tech, right? It can be the way we talk about the users when we talk about certain use cases or scenarios. Will often default to talking about, when the user uses the technology X, he will often find himself confused here. He'll rarely be confused maybe, but he'll be, using it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just joking, because this is a fun format for the jokes that don't get to come out as much. Anyhow, I think the issue of language is so subtle, but it's so impactful. And so I just throw that out there as maybe another, I don't know if it's another question or if it's somehow, embedded into some of the existing questions, but language is so powerful. And we often don't notice how much the language is geared, towards a male typology. So I think it's important, and I'm compiling a little list of links that I'll put into the chat as soon as I'm done. But it reminds me of one of the most moving lectures I've seen recently that's not Rian, which doesn't happen that often, is The Alphabet and the Goddess, a lecture by Leonard Schlein. And if you've seen it, it's super powerful. And if you haven't, get excited, because it's one non-Rian video that you're going to just really love. And he really addresses this issue of language and how it's kind of been part of potentially moving us increasingly in a masculine oriented direction, and how impactful that is to then everything we make on language or with language, which is of course everything, and of course technology included.
Mm-hmm.
And Galia, thank you, because we didn't really give as an example on the scale the issue of how the language is male-centered. And I think we really need to. The last question is on language and narrative.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
But you've given us some really wonderful specific examples from the technology world that will really, I think, bring that to life in a much different way.
I'm
And
happy to put the link as well if people want to play with. It's just a fascinating thing to experience, but you can also kind of play with different texts and see what the AI will paint for you. And it's something that I've just been thinking about. We need to run a proper study, do some comparisons. When you say this or this or this or this, what comes out, and what users think what things about these paintings, and are there gender nuances here that are beyond what meets the eye.
and John, you are next.
yeah, I just want to flag that we have about just a little less than 15 minutes left of our time. And I do want to hear from both John and Ricky. So if we can balance our use of time in that last stretch, leaving a little bit at the end for some closing comments, that would be wonderful.
Because
Thank
John,
John.
I know you're in the thick of things, and I'm very eager to hear what your thoughts are on, because we didn't even get to who do we want to, how can this be disseminated really? And who,
And that question is also the cornerstone of the conversation that is happening on March 21st. So we will certainly be circling back to that if it's not something we can get to today. So minds at ease on that. Yes, John, go ahead.
I can't hear you.
I think Ricky had her hand up first. Is that true? Because I'll wait till Ricky speaks.
I'll try to be brief, and I think yours is a better finale. But as Galia was talking about the alphabet and goddess, it was kind of connected to what I was thinking about, not just language but voice, and what the alphabet and the goddess is partly talking about is the intuitive, the way that language is linear and imagery is more intuitive and more inclusive. And I think that's also part of what I was thinking about. The piece that Jed talked about brought up for me the need for, because of who the audience or who the creators are, in the same way that politics is personal, I think technology needs to be personal. It certainly affects all of us very personally, and emotes not just rational thought, but also emotional reactions. And so I wonder if it might not make sense to have some sort of personal evaluation to enable whoever is using the toolkit to first put himself or herself in that picture and see where he or she is in that, that range. And the other thing I thought that might be helpful to add to this would be some information about evaluation. How are you going to know? What are the pieces that you look at to, to judge whether you've moved the needle or not? How do you quantify that in some way? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Ricky. And there are things you have brought up, 2 points that we need to give some thought to. And I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you. And thank you, Ricky. Just to add on to what Galia said, I've had the pleasure of working in a couple of my committees with people from indigenous traditions. And of course, that's like saying people from France. There's no one indigenous tradition. That said, a younger guy, I'm 53, younger than me, from a Maori tradition in New Zealand, pointed out that how code, another form of language, is oftentimes introduced to people from a Maori tradition. The term he used is colonialist, meaning actually offensive, not just even non-discernible or understandable, but he points out that in at least his Maori tradition, I assume this is common amongst all Maori traditions, but that in their most sacred areas of worship, there's no recording devices allowed, and that includes a pen and paper. That includes an audio recording, video recording. And so there's that. And then secondly, code and being very general, but where there's a sort of Western idea of like ones and zeros for code, that's very Western. It comes from mathematicians like Leibniz, et cetera. And what that means is that without realizing it, people in the West, male or female, using code to communicate, not all AI by any means, but machine learning, may not recognize that imbued in the very core of how they're creating their stuff is rationalism from a sort of traditional neoliberal, quasi-economics, classic neo-economic sense, which is not about partnership. It's very much about either or, 1, 0, yes, no, and very much rationalism without the aspect of our humanism that allows for relationality. Along those lines, there's a wonderful paper called about Ubuntu ethics from a wonderful guy who's from South Africa, but the Ubuntu tradition is pretty widespread in a lot of the continent in Africa. And this idea, he says, from rationality to relationality, both are essential for who we are as a human. And my sense is, going back to now your work with the toolkit, there's this sort of, I think, sense for me amongst guys, maybe it's Americans larger, but then certainly Westerners, a lot of policy settings I've been in, rationality is sort of, equivalent to success. It's equivalent to progress. It's equivalent to everything. And talking about emotions or whatever else, this sort of sense of like, okay, fine, but let's really focus on rationality, where doesn't make sense. That's not, that doesn't, it's very Western. Anyway, so therefore the toolkit, I think it's critical to point out, especially if you want an international focus, Western rationality is at the core of every political and economic discussion I'm in. And saying rationality is the only way the humans live completely ignores multiple faith traditions, multiple parts of the planet, certainly that just denies half of who we are. And I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, it's a yin and yang. But the either or, that's yin and yang is not either or, it's a communion. And especially in terms of planet, that's critical. One other quick thing I'll mention, because I know you're looking for things about the actual toolkit, which I thought was excellent.
Before you leave that, is the scale a rational scale? Because I didn't think of it as a rational scale. I just thought that it was a matter of moving the needle as we move more towards the partnership side. So I just wanted some clarity from you on that.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sort of trying to give a framing for readers at the front end, where I think like maybe it was James or perhaps it was Jed talking about kind of men reading the toolkit. And I don't know how to do it in 2 to 3 sentences. So forgive me, Rand, if that wasn't. I didn't mean to pick on the sliding scale. I thought that was very clear.
I just wanted to clarify for me. But please go ahead then.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention quickly, as it's 24 minutes after the hour, I'm very fond of
1 minute over or 5 minutes over. It's not the end of the world.
Well, I just want to be sensitive. Land acknowledgements, which is something I'm trying to do in our meetings, I'm not always doing a good job of. Whereas if again, for First Nations or Indigenous traditions, any meeting that one conducts, there's the opportunity to say physically, like I'm in New Jersey and the land here, the original people here were the Lene Lenape. And what I find so critical about that, it's a land acknowledgement. It sounds like it's an Indigenous person's acknowledgement, which of course it is, but it connects us to space. It connects us to land. I've been wondering, and I don't know the answer, but Rhiannon, anybody who could do it, it'd be you, is a partnership acknowledgement at the beginning of calls, which for a while I was asking different female friends, is there a way to have like a women's acknowledgement that would be similar to a land acknowledgement at the front end of calls? So far, I haven't figured out how to do that in a way that makes sense or wouldn't be condescending. But the whole point here is that when reading a document, when starting a meeting, and maybe this is Jed experience you have, which I really want to learn more about, the sort of paradigm of like you turn on your computer and you go, all right, I'm a white male. And that privilege means maybe I should shut up during the call. Anyway, I'll stop there because I'm not being very clear with regards to this document per se, except to say that the toolkit, I love how pragmatic it is, but a central tool is a sort of realignment when one reads, hey, here's how you can read this document. It's an invitation to put part of yourself aside and recognize that seeing partnership. Oh, and then this is the last thing I thought of. Sorry, last thing is it'd be great to have like a little case study, a narrative of what the world looks like when partnership works. Because some of the photos, for instance, you have of like women's rights marches and stuff are fantastic, but they're images I'm used to. They're very powerful. But I don't know yet what would partnership look like in 5 years from now. And especially for men, I think it's such a threat. Not that we have to cater to the men, but the point is to say, think of what it means when your daughters feel empowered in ways they never have before. Think of what you have the responsibility as a man to support the women in your lives, so that this is what the picture would look like. Do you feel less empowered because your daughter and your wife and whoever else are more empowered? Or do you feel less gender focused on the man and just a better parent and a better human? So I think that type of language where it's like, here's the power you have. You're not losing anything by giving to others.
That is an important point. And I don't know quite how to articulate it. Maybe when you have a chance, John, to look at it in more detail and give us the more specific responses, you can suggest some language. I'd appreciate that. Well, I think we have 3 minutes.
Well, so I think before I just give Rihanna an opportunity to do a final gratitude to everyone, I would express my gratitude. I've learned so much today. I really appreciate the opportunity just to even be a fly on the wall in such a rich conversation. And so thank you for that. And so my other part is just to remind you that to keep an eye out for a follow-up email from us, which will have 3 things. It has a link to the survey tool where you can register more fine-grained suggestions around the toolkit if you're inclined to do that. Even if you don't respond to all the questions, taking the chance to sort of walk through it might spark some thoughts for you. So if you can do that, we'd really appreciate it. The second thing in that is there's another link to the toolkit, so you can have it sort of side by side as you walk through that survey. And then third, there's a link to sign yourself up. Some of you already have, for March 21st, which is a Monday, a week from now. And at that session, we will be sharing, sort of reflecting back to it will include people from all 3 of the groups that we're meeting with this week. So it'll be a bigger circle. And we will be sharing back what we've learned, how it's impacting the next draft of the toolkit, and then engaging a more robust conversation around that question of moving it into places where it can have some impact. And so we look forward to seeing you again on the 21st. And Rian?
Well, I just want to request that if we could possibly have your input within the week so that it can be included for the 21st, that would help smooth our movement. And I just want to thank you all so much for, I mean, what a rich conversation, and a lot for us to take into account. And if you want to, when you, in a week, hopefully, you give us some specific feedback, also jot down some of the people, organizations that you think it can be disseminated to and through, because they're 2 different things.
And that question you'll find in the survey itself. So there's a good container for you to put that those thoughts into there.
Yes, and thank you all so much again. It's been wonderful to be with you, and I look forward to seeing you at the larger meeting. So,
Thanks.
Well, that was quite a session. I didn't take any notes,
Cool.
but I saw, thank goodness, that you were taking notes, Sarah.
I'm taking notes by hand. Quincy's taking notes on the computer, and we're also going to go back through the recordings and get highlights.
I would like to really review some of the take homes for me, if you don't mind.
Please.
One, I think that the upfront material really needs to be stronger. Talk about the blind spots. I mean, the metaphor that comes to my mind is fish in water. They, fish don't know that there is anything other than water. And so the prevailing worldview, which is so really our inheritance from earlier, more domination-oriented times, and I perhaps wouldn't use domination here, but just from earlier times, that's a huge thing.
Mhm.
And then number two, of course, what follows is this is different. We're asking you to go beyond your blind spots, which were our blind spots. I mean, this is where somehow the suggestion of making it more personal somehow and more emotional of John's, I think we might speak in a more personal voice at the beginning. I'm not sure. And I leave that to the two of you.
I did not hear him to be suggesting that, I mean, I don't think I think it might be a very nice thing to sort of speak in a more personal tone. But I heard John to be suggesting that part of his understanding of the difference between domination and partnership is that rationality is used as a tool often of domination systems, and partnership systems are by definition relational and inclusive of the emotional and other domains of life beyond just the sort of pure law.
And I'm wondering where we can include that, because it is an important point.
I think I think so too. I'm interested to go back to our 8 questions and sort of see where we might fit something that expands or that highlights that, and maybe it is in the who's in the room. Is it orientation to pure logic or orientation to all of the, to the full human experience, including intuition, emotion, dream, or however we want to, frame that side.
Well, one of the things I'm wondering is if we should split the last question into two, into language and end with narrative. Because there is so much now on language that we really didn't emphasize, which is the movement has been towards more gender neutral language, but that is very difficult because, as she pointed out, it's really built into so many languages, like all of the Romance languages have different, different verb forms, different adjectives. I mean, it's a mess. And of course, Hebrew is in that category. It's I speak is, for a man is medaber, for a woman medaberet. So what do you do with all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, one solution, and then strengthen the solutions part. And in the narratives part, it would be an opportunity to, because we talk about language, using the partnership and domination social scale instead of the, conventional categories, then the narrative would be, again, that it would be inclusive of our past, the history that we have of so many millions of years of orienting more towards partnership, because, see, I don't know enough about algorithms to really know what to do here. okay? And that's my shortcoming here. But I think that one of the assumptions in the algorithms is that it's never been different. That, you know, the normative has always been this crazy sort of thing. So, I think that in the not only recognizing our past, but recognizing that we need to change our whole worldview to see what the alternatives are to both the present system. To GDP isn't even mentioned, by the way. And I think we really have to.
Well, that was one of the pieces that I took away, was the need to speak in some way, and possibly in multiple places, to the reward structures within which the technology is being developed. So, and now it's been a concern of yours from the beginning, Rian, was to, you know, speak to that, to the economic realities of the world in which technology is made. And so, and I think that John gave us some, James gave us a little bit, although I want to go back and yes, James sort of homed in there. But John, I think the reason I was saying John is that his discussion of GDP as the standard, and so I think so that'll be another place that we look at where we can be more pointed in our questions about the big environment within which the development's happening.
And maybe that is under the narrative, that the narrative assumes that systems can't change, whereas systems have changed and can change, and are in the process of change. But we don't recognize the important trends in the areas of childhood, of gender, of economics, and of language.
Mm-hmm. And I think I was thinking, I mean, I think that could be a really good addition. And I also think that we need some language somewhere else that speaks it, and it might be in the gendered socioeconomic values question, where we can say the socioeconomic values of the market in which this technology is being developed and released, and have some language that says how you would recognize, because it's not, we don't want it to be capitalist versus socialist. We want it to be, a partnerism version of what we're moving away from and toward. And we have hints of it, but I think we can be more pointed in that section.
Great.
And I really liked, I also really liked Ricky's suggestion, possibly, of adding an evaluation tool for self and for team. She didn't say the second part. I think that's important, that there should, and they don't have to be in the body of the toolkit. They could be links that you could say, for a self-assessment of your own values or your own personal experience, go here. And for a team assessment, everybody do your self ones, and here's how to talk about it as a team. That's another, that would be, I think, her sense. And that also gets at some of Jed's input about giving people a chance to really acknowledge where they are now and what their own blind spots are. And before we launch into like what the technology is going to look like, I think that would really, I think that those were really strong suggestions.
Yeah, no, it was good. How about you, Quincy? Anything that you took away that you think we should pay attention to?
I think you all said all the things that I was thinking that were really important, but one thing that I think maybe we should look more into in terms of the gender thing is it's not he or she anymore. It's as gender becomes more like fluid. And I think that if this is going to be like a tool meant to, you know, be used in the future. I think we really have to keep that in mind. So use maybe like thinking about the ways that technology doesn't just like equalize gender, but maybe, I don't know if we want to like completely erase it, that type of thing, you know what I mean? But I think technology provides an interesting opportunity for people just to maybe go by they instead of he or she.
Well, you know, I
So that-
hesitate to do that because the she is such an important part of the shift. You know, the more stereotypically feminine. But I think certainly we should somewhere or other put in they and in the language part.
yeah.
And, you know, Galia's example was so helpful of
Us.
talking
Mhm.
about the user he versus the
Mhm.
user. That would be a perfect place to talk about they as the right option, you know, the user they.
Mhm.
Or the, you know, and if there's other places, as you're saying, Rian, like when she was talking about the art, AI generated art, you know, that's it is a he. it's being programmed, and which is a whole separate issue, which my hackles go up with the whole idea of AI produced art. So that's there, but I find that really hard to swallow as a project. But anyway,
Mhm. Or even just like maybe even bringing up the concept of like unisex. I don't know, because me as someone that has a unisex name, I think that so many people respond to like even my CPS emails thinking I'm a guy, and just kind of how that assumption I think really has had like an impact on me in terms of being a technology user.
But Quincy, when you post under a male name.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, it's somebody Hendricks. What was the first name?
Oh yeah. No, that's just because I don't have a Facebook account anymore. I deleted my own, so I had to make a new one.
Yeah, because you do.
But no
post
one
it-
sees that. No one sees that, the name.
Oh, because I do.
Yeah, but no one else does.
Oh, okay.
It's because
Okay.
it's your account.
Okay, got it. Got it. I do one other thing, and that was again, John, the indigenous part.
Yeah.
And I think we somewhere or other have to recognize the multicultural nature and the indigenous part. And they're two different things, but they're related. You know, that I think we have to acknowledge that the framers of this are Westerners, and we
Yeah.
would welcome input from both indigenous people and people from different cultures, or people from different cultures, and we'd especially like some input from indigenous cultures, something like that.
well, and I
That
think
is an acknowledgement, you know.
yeah, I think that kind of acknowledgement on our part would be good, and I think we can add to the first question about who's on the team something that says, you know, that you know, on the domination side, all team members share a Western rationality, logic-based, you know, perspective, and are uninterested or and are not considering the possibility of
But I
worldview.
don't think so, because I think that we are emotionally inclined. I mean, we're women.
No, I'm saying on our scale, if we add a scale, the domination end would sort of speak to
Oh, I see. On
a
the
unify, you know, a single Western
Yeah.
perspective, but also an unwillingness to be open to the possibility of a different world, a different sort of
Got it.
fundamental worldview. And then the other end would include Indigenous perspectives, include, and we could be specific about some of the critiques there. I think that would be, we only have 2 subscales on that question. We could add a third that could strengthen it.
Okay. All right.
Also, Rian, that email that you sent me that included an elder.
Yeah, she showed up, Mila, and then she left.
Oh, so that was okay. Yeah, because I just think her, even if she has no, technological experience or whatever, I just think even having her read this over to see, you know what I mean? Like having that perspective, I think would be really helpful.
Well, it would be if she had stayed, but she didn't.
I'm gonna send her. She asked for the recording of this video, so
Oh.
I have
And
it in our notes.
she will, because she registered, she will also get the follow-up email with the invitation to share.
Could you send her a special email, Quincy, and say,
Yeah, I would love to, because I really think that they're so important, elders.
We couldn't really interrupt at that point. We were going into the last part, when people were giving feedback, but I did acknowledge that she joined and that I was sorry that she left, but I do want to hear from her, something
Yeah.
like that. Thank you very much, and copy me if you would.
Yes.
Particular emails. Thank you.
So, and then the last thing I wanted to just raise is that we do have a larger group on Friday. And so I do think we want to, I'll do my best to sort of really have a little bit firmer tone in terms of, the length of the introductions and that, because if it's so hard for people to keep it short, but I think we need to sort of encourage that if we're all on the same page with that. And then, and also,
Sarah, I think we need to have a timekeeper.
okay.
I can do that, but I also think, and it seems like everybody is kind of good at weaving what they do into their feedback. Like, I kind of realized that. I think maybe we could just get rid of the intro section and dive right in, because I think we could, when we call on someone, we can be like, okay, will you briefly introduce yourself? And
So,
I
I mean, I think if we, so that takes us to 1 circle around the group instead of 2, which I think which could be good. What do you think, Rian?
Who is on that group? Because it's a big group, and
it's a powerhouse kind of group. So I will, I can just share my screen and show you the.
I think that's even more of a reason to skip the intros. Because if it's a powerhouse kind of group, like if it's people like Nancy Giordano and stuff, like I feel like they're really good at weaving what they do into their responses.
Well, I know that Michelle needs a special acknowledgement from me. And if you can write me something about what Michelle does it for it, that would be helpful to me. So Catherine Connors can talk and talk. I don't know about Peter can talk and talk, from what I remember. And Mila is going to join us. And then Lisa is going to join us. I think you're right that we are going to have 2, 4, 6.
It's 12 people.
12 people, that's a lot. And the 3 of us, that's 15 people. That is much different from what we had in mind.
Well, I mean, I think the answer is exactly what Quincy said. We'll do 1 trip around the circle, and we'll hear people who you are and your top line. So we'll start with the before we do introductions, we'll start by previewing the toolkit, and then have people introduce themselves and share their reactions. And then I think that will, because with 12 people, if they're each taking, 5 minutes,
I think we better tell them.
that's a full hour, and that leaves a half an hour for your introduction and people who go more than 5 minutes and the conclusion, so I think that's probably about right.
Now, what order shall we do it in? I mean, I think Michelle needs to go first or last. I mean, I don't know.
I think we should introduce our team up front, and we introduce Michelle. We introduce her as part of our team, so to speak. So you just say, I want to acknowledge Michelle's here from our partner, at the Ford Foundation, and then we just do that as a separate introduction, and then have her in the circle as we go around, share her responses to the toolkit.
How about if we ask people to talk for less than 5 minutes? A maximum of 5 minutes, because I think 5 minutes is an awfully long time.
Well, I think if we're combining the introductions and the responses, it's probably the minimum we can expect somebody to gather their thoughts in that kind of time. But I do think we can have maybe just a visual system. Maybe Quincy, you could hold up a red card or something. I think there's gentle ways to do it. And then if they go another minute, then I'll say something out loud to just say, I'm afraid, we've run out of time, and we'll circle back to you. And so I think it also means that I think it's so important, Rian, that people, love to hear your what you're taking from what they're hearing. And so you can do that for each person, but as in as focused a way as you can. And then I think it really works well for you, Rian, to just call on the next person after you, just as you did today.
Why don't we do it this way? Let's do it in reverse alphabetical order. After the team, then Aiden would be next, Van Neppen, right? Or shall we do it or Vicky would be first? If we do it with first names, let's do it with first names. So Vicky would be first, and how would that work? Peter would be next. Can we switch it around?
I would argue that we should just not disrupt like the natural flow of things.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right order.
Yeah.
So I think you just can call on people, Rian, as you see them on your screen. And also if we're going alphabetically, what happens is people tune out because they know when they sort of predict when they're going to be called on.
That is true.
So I think we just keep it we'll just in the moment, because not all these people will even probably be there. A couple won't show up. And so I think you just, when we're there, you'll see people on your screen and you can invite the next person. And sometimes you'll have a sense of, after that, of alternating, getting the men interspersed between the women and hearing from different people. We
only have 3 men, Lavi and Peter and Albie.
And Sarah, I think maybe doing a call to action at the beginning, saying and after you speak, please put whatever necessary links and your info, because I really liked how people did that this time. Or maybe we don't even have to do that. I don't know.
People just do it.
I think for the 21st, our preparation for the 21st, I feel like it should include, even just as we're reflecting back what we heard from people, there should be at the beginning a slide that has the names of everybody the name and role and organization of everybody who participated. So, and that we can just pull from when they registered, they shared that information for us. And if they've shared a website, I think that might, I don't know, maybe it's not that useful to have it on the slide, but somehow I think we should have a roster that we can send to people after the event that says, if you want to be in touch with people you met through this convening, here's the contact list.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a lot to do before now and Friday. I'm wondering, I mean, because I was able to tell them of some of the feedback from the first session, but there was so much feedback from this session that I don't think I even can.
Well, and I don't think that's important. I mean, I think these first three groups are sort of that. It's not irrelevant, but the whole point of the 21st is to share back from from what we heard from everybody. So I don't think it's that important to build group to group. It's more important for us to take in. This is our opportunity to take in, and then we'll collate it and share it back.
Okay. Well, thank you both so much. Quincy has just, she's back. Hi.
Sorry, my fire alarm keeps going off.
Your fire alarm?
Yeah,
Well, that's not good.
I know. I just checked. I think it's fine.
No, Quincy, you better look.
I know. Well, it was going off in the middle of our meeting, and my roommates were like, "What's going on?" And then I tried to help them handle it, but I think they talked to the super, and it's fine. Also, so the meeting just automatically stopped recording in the middle because I think we ran out of space.
I think that is what happened.
So can you save it? I think the one when it ran out of space, I have it saved to my desktop. I pressed that option. But will you just make sure to save it to your desktop, because I don't think like this Zoom like refresh to realize that we have space in there now.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I know what you mean. Yes, I will for sure save it. And then, Quincy, when you and I meet on Monday, we'll work through who's doing what in terms of collating all the suggestions.
Yeah.
And
I copied the chat, and it's all in the doc, this doc.
Great. So we have all these streams of inputs, and then on Monday, we'll figure out how we're processing all of that and then bringing it to Rian for decision-making about what goes where.
We have an appointment for that, my dear.
Well, I was assuming that we would meet on Wednesday, the 16th at our usual time. We might want some additional time, though.
I think we probably do want some additional time. So do you want to start at 11?
I could do that on Wednesday.
Yeah, you want to start at 11:30? I mean, what
Does that work for you to start at 11, Quincy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great.
So could you write an email to Leah that we're starting that meeting at 11 on Wednesday?
I'll do that.
Okay, and that's Wednesday the 16th, right?
That's right.
And on Friday,
I think we're going to need that amount of time to really work through all of these different inputs that we're getting and decide what we want to act on immediately, what we want to sort of think about for a while, and what we're just going to sort of set aside.
Okay, my dears. Well, it's a lot to absorb, and I'm glad that you're absorbing, because I'm a little bit, I don't know, ever since David died, I've been sort of, I don't know what I've been.
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, I know from being the daughter of a grief counselor that the grief process is partly rewires your brain. And so that's a lot of work that your brain is doing under the surface, to.
How does it rewire? I don't understand.
Well, it has a huge impact. Your neural networks are formed in part in relationship to David. And so rewiring the circuits of your brain that ordinarily would run through your conversations with him, your connection with him, that's a profound shift in brain. So people often experience cognitive shifts in their grief process that are really normal.
Well, I don't know. I'm still very connected to him. And I'm writing a book of his poetry with giving background to it. So I don't know. And I sort of talked to him.
Wonderful.
So I don't know. But I cry a lot.
Yeah. All of that is exactly what you should be doing and all you can be doing.
I didn't know that who is the grief counselor?
My mother worked with hospice for many years as a grief counselor and family counselor.
Oh, really?
Process. She ran grief groups, for example, and also did individual home visits with people who were recently bereaved. And so I just osmosis really learned a lot from her about some of the ways that our expectations about what grief should look like are not very realistic, and that it's a really a very complex and unscripted kind of process that everybody experiences in their own way. But there's some very normal sort of usual parts of it, which include feeling like which include having, good conversations with the person who isn't there, and that can be for the rest of your life. And also that experience of just the waves of emotion that are beyond your control,
They sure are beyond my control.
Yeah.
I miss him.
Yeah.
I know his quality of life was so lousy that he wanted to die, but still.
Yeah. It's really hard to be the one who's left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, our hearts are with you, and I am glad that we have this work that you have, can stay connected to, this larger groups, all the ways in which, like the group today, were so lovely in sharing the impact of your life on them, and it doesn't. And I mean, I think you can take heart knowing how much David's support and love of you is baked in to that work.
I thank you both so much, and
Right.
I will talk to you. So I'm trying to figure out next week. We don't have an appointment on Monday, but I have an appointment with you, Quincy, on Tuesday, right? At noon?
Okay, well, that's when Sarah and I usually meet. Are we going to meet on Tuesday, Sarah?
My goal would be that you and I would meet on Monday and Tuesday, Quincy, to be prepared for Rion on Wednesday.
So then
Yeah.
I will not meet with you. So would you please tell Leah also that I'm not meeting with Quincy on Tuesday, because otherwise she'll send it to me and I'll be totally confused.
And then, yeah, maybe we can meet like on Thursday that week. We can talk about it more after we.
Okay.
Because I'm imagining that if we come to you on Wednesday, the 16th, with some recommendations for what we do here's what the feedback was, here's what we think we should maybe do with it. It may still take us Thursday, Friday. It will still take us Thursday, Friday to get that embedded back into the toolkit and also create the slides for Monday. So Monday the 21st. So I think that we should probably set a time on Friday to go over slides and go over the revised toolkit so we all know what we're presenting on Monday.
All right, I agree. I have a webinar at 1. Would 2 o'clock be too late?
On the 18th?
Yeah. It for you, Sarah, it will work, but Quincy, I'm worried about it being.
That's fine. Yeah.
So 2 o'clock would be okay?
Yes.
So let's add, if you can add that, Quincy, to our to our lineup.
Yeah.
For me, next week is, I'm just really devoting myself to this work all next week.
Is that the 17th? Friday the.
It's the
no,
Friday's the 18th.
18th.
Yeah. I wonder what I put down for the 18th. Oh, God.
I wish we hadn't put that final meeting on a Monday. I really wish we had done it on a Tuesday. That would have been so helpful, but
But we did,
there are people registered, so we're going to roll with it.
I wonder what we did with, why is the 18th a day? Let me look at what Leah sent me here, if you don't mind. All right, the 18th, because I've got something on the 18th.
You have a podcast at 1 o'clock.
Clay Boyton, I guess. I don't know why. Did I arrange for somebody? Oh God, you know, I do this and then I don't know what I've done because I don't write it.
What she put into the calendar is that this is the Clay Boykin podcast at 1 o'clock in search of the new compassionate male.
Okay. You know, I did something for the 18th, but I have no idea what it was. So
Oh, so that's an event.
if it's, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah, let us know if 2 o'clock does not work. Otherwise, we'll plan to meet then.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. Oh, I know what it is. I added an 11 o'clock. All right, that's okay. It's all right. I see it on my.
So the 2 o'clock works.
Yeah, 2 o'clock works.
And then you have a 3 o'clock with Leah. So that'll just.
I'll see if I can change. Why don't you ask Leah if we can make her at 3:30 or 4? Because I have a feeling it'll take us more than an hour.
May.
Okay, and
Yep.
copy us, please.
I'm doing it right now.
Thank you so much, Quincy. You just handling
course.
these scheduling things and emails and all of that are just, you know, it takes all of us to pull this off, but I think it's going really.
It's quite a project, my dear.
Yeah.
It really is, but we're doing it. I mean,
We are. It's been on